I am honored to be joined today by Brian Wright, the president of Send Relief, Sister Norma, the executive director of Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, and Josh Dixon, the vice president of public policy at United Way Worldwide. Thank you all for being here today. In a few brief words, can you each describe, because there's a lot of different things that you each have done and are currently doing, can you give our audience just a brief picture in a couple of sentences of what your work looks like right now? Starting with you, Brian.
Begin? Okay. Well, I am the first president of Send Relief, and our two mission boards, the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention, asked me to serve in this role. It's been going about 3.5 years, and before that I was a founding pastor of a church in Atlanta for 38 years that had been heavily blessed from the volunteer mission perspective, and so I think that's why the good Lord put me in this role at this time.
Thank you.
So I am Sister Norma, and I oversee the charitable arm of the Catholic Church at the border, right with Texas with Mexico. And so it becomes a responsibility to really be present to the community in every respect, especially with those folks, those families that really need our help in all areas, you know, families that live in the community and new families that are just arriving into the United States, and taking that lead in the response to respond with a humanitarian response for these families.
Great. Josh Dixon, I serve, as Phebe mentioned, as the Vice President of Public Policy for United Way Worldwide, and it's great to be with you all today. Thank you so much for having me. I work kind of at the intersection of policy on the Hill, as well as program implementation with the executive branch. So United Way is a large organization. We have over 1,000 local affiliates around the country. We're in every congressional district in 95% of America, and our local United Ways really are the power of United Way, and they serve as a community connector, working across different sectors to solve local community challenges in the areas of health, education, and economic mobility. And my job really is to advocate for our key priorities in Congress, to figure out how we work really closely with the executive branch, with the federal agencies, with the White House, to implement policy and to be a part of that work at the local level where policy really matters the most. And then we also work to equip our local United Ways to do advocacy at the state level, because that's really important for them too. And then we work in coalitions with a lot of other large organizations as well, including Catholic Charities in a lot of ways, and hopefully even more so with Send Relief. So, yeah.
Thank you, Josh. So a Barna study that was done in March of this year measured views on volunteering and generosity, measuring both the general population and people who identified as Christian. And 66% of Christians said that there is more to generosity than giving money, over 53% of all US adults. And 38% of practicing Christians strongly agree that every person should volunteer regularly, well over the 90% average in the general population. Each of you have a wealth of experience working with faith groups or individuals who are motivated by faith. What is it that motivates Christians to serve? And what does that say about Christianity and the God who Christians serve? Yeah, whoever wants to.
I'd be glad to share a word. Nobody embodies service like Jesus. I mean, he came to serve, not to be served, so he is the ultimate example in giving his life for us on the cross so that we could have this relationship with God. But I think what we are seeking to do at Send Relief is really combine the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. When we show people the love of Christ in very tangible and real ways, then it opens the doors. It's kind of a winning the right to be heard to share the good news of Christ. And if you look at his ministry all through the Gospels, Christ is meeting physical and material needs, but he is also always reminding them that the greatest need is spiritual. A paralyzed man, he asked him, or tells him, your sins are forgiven. Everybody's sitting there, good night. He's here to be healed. And yet he was just constantly, whether it was the woman at the well looking for good, clean water, and he talked about living water, whether it was a blind man that he restored his sight to, it was always bringing it back to the ultimate need of salvation through faith in Christ. So we want to see a combination of that. And when people get outside the church building and begin to really serve their community and seek to embody the light of Christ, salt and light of Christ, then their whole faith begins to move to a new dimension. Their relationship with the Lord does. And we saw that in our church that I pastored for many years as people began to go on mission trips globally and then got very convicted about all the needs in Metro Atlanta, very close to us and underserved communities in Atlanta. And getting outside the church building to share the good news of Christ in tangible ways is that combination of Great Commandment and Great Commission.
So I go next. My experience with people who have stepped up to offer and volunteer and give service has been, especially now with the immigrants, the response that I've seen so vividly is the whole community stepping up and saying, how can I help, And, it's very clear for me that people in South Texas at the border that actually have a big heart. They care about people. And one of the things that makes a difference about caring has to do a lot with the fact that they're close. They can see. I can see the face. I can see their eyes. I can see the pain. And immediately something happens in us that changes us to want to help, And that's what people that around us, since day one have stepped up to join and to be able to help, And one of the first things that happened when we started the response to humanitarian response to immigrants, and that made a turning point as to how everybody got involved, And it didn't matter what faith denominations they were. It didn't matter who you were. They stepped up. And one of the things that was very definitive about it was the fact that when I was asked, what are you doing here, And when you saw a room full of people with helping other people, and for the most part, these people were actually helping because their God was telling them, this is who we must do. We must help our brothers and sisters. And my response was, restoring human dignity. That's what we're doing, It's key to our faith. It's key to who we are. And that response got the whole city force behind us, and even the Border Patrol, even no matter who you were there because you believe that restoring human dignity is part of who we are to one another, And so I think that's key to what our faith moves us forward to do, to help others, because we're able to see the need and the struggle, and we want to be able to restore that dignity of this person that is in need of that,
That's really beautiful.
And I'll just add a little bit to the wonderful things that Bryant and Sister Norma shared. I think that something that's always stood out to me is this call in the gospel, to whom much is given, much is required, right? To whom much is given, much is asked of, I think depending on the translation. And, I think that I've always thought about that in this way, which was modeled by my parents and by people who were influential in my life, who were motivated by their faith, as how are you going to use the opportunities given to you to open the doors of opportunity for other people? And I think you heard a lot of good reason and rationale for that, and both what Bryant and Sister Norma shared in terms of the real heart of Christianity, the dignity of each other, that love that we're called to show. And I think two very quick and interesting examples. So one is early on in my career, I was working for Teach for America, and I had been a Teach for America teacher, and I was trying to figure out, if I was going to stay in the classroom or what I was going to do after my second year with Teach for America. And there was actually some folks on staff reached out and they said, hey, we're actually looking for someone to go and recruit at faith-based colleges and universities because kind of out of nowhere, we were just surveying our teachers, and we found out that like the number one reason why people were saying that they were coming and choosing to teach for America was because they're motivated by their faith. And we're not even actively trying to recruit people of faith. It just so happened that we have a service program and it's drawing people to it. And I thought that was really compelling. And then once we did some of that active outreach, we saw a really, really strong response from people, which I thought was a very indicative of that deep call to service. And then the other example is in my last job, I was working in the White House Office of Public Engagement, and we were working on a lot of major initiatives during the pandemic to try to get people vaccinated, to try to get resources out the door, to try to help people access things like the child tax credit and other anti-poverty measures. And it was just so fascinating how much political divisions just dropped for people and dropped at the door, and how people came together and rallied from across the political spectrum to step up and work with us to get these resources out to their communities, to people who were hurting it, people who were impacted by the pandemic, people who were impacted from the health side, but then also from the collateral economic impacts of the pandemic and whatnot. And those are some of the stories that should be told a lot more, but I think it really represents so much for folks who do identify as Christians like we do, that deep imperative to serve and to think about how we use those opportunities that we're given to open up the doors of opportunity for other people.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. I want to kind of tease out and continue to dig into something you just said. There's a long history of Christians shouldering the social responsibility for most vulnerable populations in America, of filling needs and gaps, of coming together around innovative policy solutions. I wonder, would each of you talk a little bit about the role that faith communities play in the broader social fabric of America? And what is the role that faith organizations and communities should play? And maybe if you have some examples, both from your present work or historically, to share as well with that.
I'd love to share one. When I was pastoring at Johnson Ferry, Obama opened up the door for Syrian refugees to come to the United States, and we had worked a great deal with World Relief, which is the one kind of evangelical relief and resettlement group that's approved by the government. And because of our history and all that we had done in working with Syrian refugees overseas, we said we'd like to adopt 10 of those families. Well, because we're in an area of North Atlanta at the time, no longer, but at the time was overwhelmingly Republican, for some reason the press got a hold of this, wondering why this Baptist church in Republican North Atlanta would adopt Syrian Muslim families, concerns that all the light bulbs go off of concern and all. But it really helped folks to understand that the government's role was to decide who comes in. They have a regulatory role. They have a responsibility on big decisions like that, but the church has a different role. We're to love those in the name of Jesus. Whoever crosses our path, whoever comes our way. Our role is different. And I think a lot of folks get confused, like when you read the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is written for individuals who are followers of Jesus. It's not the teaching of the government. Then you go to Romans 13, you find out the government has a different role in seeking to protect the citizens, punish evil, administer justice. So I think just helping people understand there's differences in the role of the church and the government. There's certain catastrophes. A lot of our work is going into disaster relief areas, and there's tons of ways that the government has to come in, and no churches could ever meet those needs. At the same time, the church is the heart, the face, the love a lot of times that really encourages people in those kind of times. So it can be a compliment. Of course, there can also be a lot of tension, and we know that as a part of the world we live in now. But I think that's just one example.
I agree. I would just pick up the fact that the church is the heartbeat of who we are in our community, in our world, in our country. And if with our presence, we bring out the best of everybody. The person is held to higher standards of acting out of responsibility to care for one another, to make sure that the common good and the dignity of a person is upheld, And so it is important. I find myself at the border with all the institutions, whether it's Border Patrol or the city officials. They actually want us to be able to be part of their decision making to decide, how do we address this? How do we help our community resolve what is happening right now that we're facing? Church has a big part in making sure that we bring community together,
Yeah, and I think just to build on these great examples, I think that, like, one, I have seen how important it is to step into this work instead of pulling away from it out of fear of divisions and politics and all these things. And you don't have to do partisan politics to step into the public arena and serve people and influence public policy. And I think it's actually critical that we have people and organizations that are really showing moral leadership now as much as ever in these spaces, and really centering a lot of this work and a lot of the policy work on serving the most vulnerable, which the emphasis can easily get pulled away with all the different things going on in our country and all the things that pull our attention in different directions all the time. And then two is, I think that there is just a critical need to show the love of Jesus to people. And that this is a space to do it. And I've seen that happen in a lot of the work that I've been fortunate to be a part of. And again, I go back to the pandemic and just seeing how many organizations were just willing to step up right away and be like, we will help people get access to rental assistance. We will help people get access to free tax prep services so they can get these tax credits for families that are in deep poverty. We will help people connect with PPP loans so they can keep their church or their nonprofit afloat. And again, a lot of these stories were not told, but the work happened and the work needs to keep happening, and we need to tell the stories more.
I would just like to add that, when something happens in our community, like a disaster, flooding, many organizations that are like first responders, they turn to us as church so that the families can open their doors because they're afraid. And so there's this trust factor that is so key into bringing people to trust and to care and to connect,
Could you talk a little bit more about how do you build that trust? What does that look like?
The trust comes from the fact that they see that you care, that is important. And I think it's important that we become visible presence always into the community so they know who you are, or at least they can. I remember the time when the very first time that I went to a bus station in South Texas where we started to get immigrants dropped off by Border Patrol. And the immigrants were in a terrible condition. They were so frightened, so afraid. They didn't trust nobody. But as soon as I came to their presence and I said, will you allow me to help you? And so they had a sense of, I can trust her, I represent the church, and that gave them the trust that they could go ahead and say, because they didn't trust nobody. Everybody was out there to get them, to take advantage of them. And so I was able to get all the volunteers that really cared to join together and let's do this, let's do this together. And I believe that is key to being able to really stand up to what it means for you to be a person of faith, a leader of faith, and live up to those standards so that people can trust you.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you. How do we build a culture of service? And as part of this, I would love as well to hear your thoughts on how do we encourage the next generation, thinking about Gen Z, thinking about Generation Alpha after them, to be part of a culture of service and volunteerism. And what are you kind of seeing in that? Yeah.
Well, Phoebe, it's in the DNA of Gen Z and millennials to to be in ministries of compassion. That's what Sin Relief is all about, just different ministries of compassion, whether it's rescuing those that are trapped in sex slavery, or whether it's helping children and families like orphan care, or whether it's foster care, adoption care. And what's so exciting about the Gen Z millennial generation is they are passionate about that, and they want to take part. They want to give their time. They want to give not just their resources, but even more their time, which is great, because when we're talking about volunteerism here, they step to the forefront. So I think the church has a tremendous opportunity. I do want to put in a plug for the church. So what I do love about this role is that our whole role is serving churches as churches carry out their ministry. So when a disaster, or like the Eastern European churches that we've been working with the Ukrainian refugees, those churches are going to be there long after this crisis and war has passed. And I love the idea of working through the local church. And one thing I would encourage you folks on is don't give up on the local church, because you've got the largest manpower of volunteers in local churches all over the world. And if they can just be mobilized to take Jesus seriously when he says to us, look, how you treat the least of these, how you treat people who are hurting, is how you treat me. And once people see that and what he teaches about the sheep and the goats in Matthew 25, then they can begin to catch the vision of what it means to show that love of Christ in a key way.
I agree. I have the opportunity to speak in so many universities and high schools and even grammar schools. I was just in New York, and the response of the students, the youth, is amazing. That desire to become involved. They care about what is happening. They want to be able to be part of solutions, and honestly, I'm impressed. I just came from Canada, Toronto, and the university I was there. The kids are so involved in making a difference in what's happening, the injustices that are happening in their communities, in their country, and I'm amazed at what the promise for the future for us because of them. They really are committed, and so I think we need to open the doors for them to move forward, invite them and get them. I think that's what's holding many of them back is the lack of invitation to become involved and to take them seriously.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think that something that you were saying earlier, Sister Norma, about the importance of the human connection is so key. And I think you were both sharing about the passion we see in Gen Z and other young folks to be advocates for important causes, to be advocates against broken systems, to really focus on redemption and reconciliation. And I think that is really important, and it's important to get offline a little bit and to get into community. And I think that too often people are sitting there on screens and only on screens. And I think that where I have seen the most moving, formative, influential and impactful work happen is person to person with people. That's where people are hurting, and then that's where so much work is to be done. And that's really formative for people. I know it was in my own experience as a Teach for America teacher on the south side of Chicago. And I know it is for so many others. And that's why I think that the work that you all have done as Sister Norma on the border, and then with your church in Atlanta, Brian, I think that just that person to person ministry really equips you for a lifetime of service.
Just to say something to what he's just said to us, is what I always encourage is the importance of presence. That says more than anything I'm going to do or say. Just the fact that I'm authentically present to this person before me, so that connection, as you're talking about, is so important,
Yeah. As a final question, what is exciting you these days, and what are some of the trends and innovations that you are seeing in service and volunteerism? And I wonder, Josh, if you would be able to speak to, so you work for United Way, which is not a faith-based organization. What are some ways that Christians can be part of non-faith-based organizations as a part of their service and volunteerism?
I'm going to start real quick. I think to build off what we were just saying, like stepping into these spaces, and especially intentionally stepping into spaces that I think Christian-specific spaces are important, and other spaces that are multi-faith or interfaith or non-sectarian are important too, because we need as many people as possible in those spaces also, and we need the Christian witness there too. And so I think that through, whether it's through an organization like a United Way, or it's through a service program like AmeriCorps or a state service program, there are a lot of things that are more and deeply involved. But I also think that there are a lot of things just in any community, and taking the first step to just show up and build relationships really goes a significant way. And the first thing that I ever got involved in on that front was an interfaith community organizing group that I just kind of stumbled into on the south side of Chicago. And that was probably one of the most powerful groups of people that I had a chance to work with. So I think that there's a lot that you can contribute, but a lot that you can gain from that as well.
Well, yes, I think that what excites me is the opportunity for us to really break away from what we're so common, so used to, but really allow the creative nature we have to explore the possibilities of what we can actually do together as people of faith, people, or not even everybody, the whole community, and how can we be one community and not be so focused in what makes us different, but rather what brings us together.
I would just add, I think we have a great opportunity today, especially with the Gen Z and millennial generation, to show the love of Christ in very tangible ways. And as cynical as the world is about the church, understandably so, and for a multitude of reasons, but as cynical as they are, one thing they are excited about is seeing folks being cared for that are hurting in your community. And so it's just a tremendous opportunity we have today to cast a different light on the church and what the church is really supposed to be, but in a way that people in this de-churched time, where so many are literally being de-churched voluntarily because of different issues they have with the church, this is an opportunity to show Christ in a very real way to folks. Now, obviously, we're not to compromise our biblical convictions in doing that, because then we're losing the big picture of what God has called us to do. But at the same time, we have a tremendous opportunity today to show the love of Christ in a way that people want to be a part of that.
Thank you all, and thank you for the powerful work that you all are doing in your communities and the testimony of your lives.
A privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.